Because there's some battles that are worth fighting. There are some things that are worth fighting for. I mean, think about an Olympic athlete who have to get to bed on time and they don't snack and they get this amount of exercise and they do these amounts of things. They don't drink alcohol, all these things. Why? Because there's some things worth fighting for. So if paying off your debt is something worth fighting for, if going to the Olympics is something worth fighting for, question, is heaven worth fighting for? Jesus seems to think so. You know, when Jesus says that word, he says, you strive. The word Jesus uses for the word strive is a word that can be translated into English, agonize. It's actually the same root of what is described, what Jesus experienced in the garden, in his passion. When he's going through his agony, that's the same word that Jesus says, when you're going for heaven, agonize for heaven, strive for heaven, just in the exact same way that he agonized during his passion. But for us, we have to ask the question, is heaven worth fighting for? And if it is, where am I fighting? If it is, how am I fighting? At the same time, that first truth, that we don't automatically get heaven. The second truth, we can't earn heaven, can't work our way to heaven. The first lie is that discomfort is dangerous, but the other lie is that harder is holier, or harder equals holier. Because just because something's difficult doesn't mean that it's good for us. The difficulty is not the point. In fact, we can say it like this, the narrow gate that Jesus talks about, the narrow gate is not the point. What's beyond the narrow gate, that's the point, right? The whole point is not how difficult the road is. The whole point is where that road leads to. I mean, think about this. What does Jesus say to those who are outside, who are knocking on the door, saying, let us in? He says to them, I don't know where you're from. In another gospel, Jesus says, I don't know you. What does that mean? That means basically, I don't have a relationship with you.
Not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name, and in thy name cast out devils, and in thy name done many wonderful works? And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity.
So all of the fighting, all of the struggling, all the striving, all the agonizing is oriented towards what? It's oriented towards knowing him. It's all oriented towards becoming like him. It's all oriented towards doing what he did, which is doing the Father's will, which is so key. We're going to strive, absolutely. We're going to agonize, yes. We're going to battle and fight for what? It's going to be hard. It's going to be uncomfortable. But it's supposed to lead to a relationship. The difficulty isn't the point. The narrow road is not the point. What the narrow road leads to, that's the point.
Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man which built his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And every one who heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them not, shall be likened unto a foolish man which built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell. And great was the fall of it.
The fruit of the discipline is now I have a right relationship with my God himself. And that's one of the things is we realize that all of the disciplines, all the asceticisms of the Exodus 90, or any striving after the Lord should be leading, it should be training in trust. I mean, think about this. Anytime you and I take time aside and say, I'm going to pray now instead of doing anything else, we're being trained in trust. That, okay, I'm not doing anything but talking to the Lord, and I trust that he hears me, and I trust that he wants me here, and I trust that he's present as I am present. That every time we experience failure, that's being trained in humility. Every time we experience even our brokenness and our weakness, and we bring that brokenness, bring that weakness to the Lord, We're growing in friendship. I mean, when we let the Lord love us as we are right now, we're actually growing in friendship with God himself. See, all of this, the taking time to pray, even in the midst of our failure, in the midst of our weakness, all that striving is meant to bring us back again and again and again into contact with God. And that contact with him brings about the fruit of the training, which is the right relationship. There is an inestimable inequality between God's worthiness and our unworthiness. If we're not willing to say that God, you're worthy and I'm unworthy, in comparison to you, then what we're ultimately saying is, God, yeah, you should have died for me. Yeah, actually, God, you kind of owed it to me to redeem me. That actually, at this moment, God, in this moment of the Mass, you ought to offer your body, blood, soul, and divinity to someone like me. But we're not saying that. We're saying, actually, God, in relation to this, your beauty, your truth, your goodness, your holiness, you let me participate in that, but I don't have any on my own. Apart from you, I'm zero. But with you, and that's the crazy thing is, but with you, Lord, you make me new. Here's what God does. God makes you and I able to be in his presence. We're not worthy to be in his presence. That's why I love that the prayer doesn't just end, Lord, I'm not worthy that you should enter under my roof. We say, but only say the word. Why? Because we know him. We know the God we're about to receive. We know the God who's declared our goodness. We know the God who's redeemed us. We know that he wants us to come near to him. We first have to recognize that I don't deserve this. You didn't owe this to me. I am not worthy, but because of your redemption, I'm able. I am not enough, but because of you, I have more than enough. We need that humility, I think. I think that's so important. Hopefully, the next time you go to Mass and you get the chance to utter those words, you're able to say them with all the meaning that we're called to pray them with. Recognizing, Lord, you alone are worthy. I am not worthy, but because of your goodness, I am able. From all of us here to Ascension Presents, my name's Father Mike. God bless.
Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.
We should hardly dare to ask that any notice be taken of ourselves, but we pine. The sense that in this universe we are treated as strangers, the longing to be acknowledged, to meet with some response, to bridge some chasm that yawns between us and reality is part of our inconsolable secret. And surely from this point of view, the promise of glory, in the sense described, becomes highly relevant to our deep desire. For glory means good report with God, acceptance by God, response, acknowledgement, and welcome into the heart of things. The door on which we have been knocking all our lives will open at last. Perhaps it seems rather crude to describe glory as the fact of being noticed by God. But this is almost the language of the New Testament. St. Paul promises to those who love God, not, as we should expect, that they will know him, but that they will be known by him. 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 3. It is a strange promise. Does not God know all things at all times? But it is dreadfully re-echoed in another passage of the New Testament. There we are warned that it may happen to any one of us to appear at last before the face of God and hear only the appalling words, I never knew you, depart from me. In some sense, as dark to the intellect as it is unendurable to the feelings, we can be both banished from the presence of him who is present everywhere and erased from the knowledge of him who knows all. We can be left utterly and absolutely outside, repelled, exiled, estranged, finally and unspeakably ignored. On the other hand, we can be called in, welcomed, received, acknowledged. We walk every day on the razor edge between these two incredible possibilities. Apparently then, a lifelong nostalgia, a longing to be reunited with something in the universe from which we now feel cut off, to be on the inside of some door which we have always seen from the outside, is no mere neurotic fancy, but the truest index of our real situation. And to be at last summoned inside would be both glory and honor beyond all our merits, and also the healing of that old ache. And this brings me to the other sense of glory. Glory as brightness, splendor, luminosity. We are to shine as the sun. We are to be given the morning star. I think I begin to see what it means. In one way, of course, God has given us the morning star already. You can go and enjoy the gift on many fine mornings if you get up early enough. What more, you may ask, do we want? But we want so much more. Something the books on aesthetics take little notice of. But the poets and the mythologies know all about it. We do not want merely to see beauty, though God knows even that is bounty enough. We want something else which can hardly be put into words. To be united with the beauty we see, to pass into it, to receive it into ourselves, to bathe in it, to become part of it. That is why we have peopled air and earth and water with gods and goddesses, and nymphs and elves. That, though we cannot, yet these projections can enjoy in themselves that beauty, grace, and power of which nature is the image. That is why the poets tell us such lovely falsehoods. They talk as if the west wind could really sweep into a human soul, but it can't. They tell us that beauty born of murmuring sound will pass into a human face, but it won't, or not yet. For if we take the imagery of Scripture seriously, if we believe that God will one day give us the morning star and cause us to put on the splendor of the sun, then we may surmise that both the ancient myths and the modern poetry, so false as history, may be very near the truth as prophecy. At present, we are on the outside of the world, the wrong side of the door. We discern the freshness and purity of morning, but they do not make us fresh and pure. We cannot mingle with the splendors we see. But all the leaves of the New Testament are rustling with the rumor that it will not always be so. Someday, God willing, we shall get in. When human souls have become as perfect in voluntary obedience as the inanimate creation is in its lifeless obedience, then they will put on its glory, or rather that greater glory of which nature is only the first sketch. For you must not think that I am putting forward any heathen fancy of being absorbed into nature. Nature is mortal. We shall outlive her. When all the suns and nebulae have passed away, each one of you will still be alive. I can think of at least one such use. It may be possible for each to think too much of his own potential glory hereafter. It is hardly possible for him to think too often or too deeply about that of his neighbor. The load or weight or burden of my neighbor's glory should be laid daily on my back, a load so heavy that only humility can carry it, and the backs of the proud will be broken. It is a serious thing to live in a society of possible gods and goddesses, to remember that the dullest and most uninteresting person you can talk to may one day be a creature which, if you saw it now, you would be strongly tempted to worship, or else a horror and a corruption such as you now meet, if at all, only in a nightmare. All day long we are, in some degree, helping each other to one or other of these destinations. It is in the light of these overwhelming possibilities, it is with the awe and the circumspection proper to them, that we should conduct all our dealings with one another, all friendships, all loves, all play, all politics. There are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. Nations, cultures, arts, civilizations, these are mortal, and their life is to ours as the life of a gnat. But it is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit. Immortal horrors or everlasting splendors. This does not mean that we are to be perpetually solemn. We must play. But our merriment must be of that kind, and it is, in fact, the merriest kind, which exists between people who have, from the outset, taken each other seriously. No flippancy, no superiority, no presumption. And our charity must be a real and costly love, with deep feeling for the sins in spite of which we love the sinner. no mere tolerance or indulgence which parodies love as flippancy parodies merriment. Next to the Blessed Sacrament itself, your neighbor is the holiest object presented to your senses. If he is your Christian neighbor, he is holy in almost the same way, for in him Christ vere latitat, the glorifier and the glorified, glory himself, is truly hidden.
So here's the last thing. The last thing is, what is one way this week that you're going to strive for heaven? Like, what is one way this week that you're going to battle for heaven? What's one way? Not all the things you're going to do. Here's a big checklist of things, but just what's one way that you're going to struggle for heaven? Because we know we can't earn heaven, but we must choose heaven. Especially in our world, we will never, living in this world, living like everyone else, we will not drift to heaven. Therefore, we have to fight for heaven. So, this week, where will you fight for heaven? This week, in what way will you struggle for heaven? This week, how will you strive after heaven?